In the freezing, pitch-black depths of the Pacific Ocean during the tense spring of 1968, a catastrophic event changed the Cold War forever. A massive Soviet ballistic missile submarine suddenly suffered an internal explosion, and that's where things get interesting. The vessel, known as the K-129, was carrying three massive nuclear missiles when it plummeted straight to the ocean floor. But here's the kicker. The Soviet Navy launched a frantic, massive search operation covering millions of square miles. But they had absolutely no idea where their own submarine went down. For weeks, their fleet scanned the waves, completely blind, before finally giving up in total despair. Now look at how the United States completely turned the tables. The Americans hadn't missed a single thing. Using a highly classified network of underwater acoustic listening posts called SOSUS, the U.S. Navy pinpointed the exact location of the blast. Mark this down. The Soviet superpower had just lost their ultimate weapon, but Washington knew exactly where it was hiding, and it gets even crazier. The submarine wasn't sitting in shallow coastal waters. It was resting under 3 miles of crushing ocean pressure, nearly 16,000 feet deep. No human technology in history had ever successfully recovered anything from that terrifying depth. To the leaders in the Kremlin, the secrets inside that sub were safe forever. They thought physics itself would protect them. They were dead wrong. The CIA looked at that sunken prize and saw a golden opportunity. Inside that hull were Soviet military encryption keys, nuclear warheads, and top-secret communication manuals. Pay close attention to this. The American intelligence apparatus decided they weren't just going to look at it, they were going to steal it. But how do you pull a 3,000-ton nuclear submarine off the ocean floor right under the noses of Soviet spy ships that constantly patrol the waters? This is where the absolute genius of American audacity takes over. The CIA realized they couldn't just sail a heavily armed military salvage ship out there without triggering World War III. They needed the ultimate cover story. Instead of hiding the operation in the deep shadows, American strategists made a mind-blowing decision. They were going to hide it in plain sight by creating a massive fake global industry. Listen closely to this. The CIA approached the most famous, eccentric, and mysterious billionaire in the world at the time, Howard Hughes. They asked him to be the public face of a completely fabricated oceanic mining venture, and it gets even crazier. Hughes agreed to tell the global media that his company was spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a colossal revolutionary ship called the Hughes Glomar Explorer. The official story? They were going to mine precious manganese nodules from the deep ocean floor. The global news media swallowed the lie completely. Wall Street was absolutely fascinated by this bold new frontier of American capitalism. But behind the scenes, the engineering reality was absolutely staggering. The ship wasn't built for mining at all. It was engineered around a massive hidden hollow center known as the Moon Pool. Inside this secret chamber, completely invisible to passing ships, spy planes, and Soviet satellites, was a colossal mechanical claw of epic proportions. Think about this for a second. American engineers were building a real-life giant arcade claw designed to descend miles into the abyss, wrap its massive steel fingers around a Soviet nuclear submarine, and hoist it silently into the belly of the ship. When the Soviet intelligence officers looked at the public blueprints of the Glomar Explorer, they laughed it off as a rich American's foolish vanity project. But they had absolutely no clue that they were staring directly at their worst military nightmare. To make this impossible heist a reality, the CIA established a highly classified division called Global Marine Development. Every single engineer hired for the project had to undergo rigorous top-tier security clearance checks. The technical challenges were unmatched. To lower a giant mechanical claw 3 miles deep, the ship required a heavy, segmented steel pipe string that weighed millions of pounds. The ship had to remain perfectly stationary over the target area, despite raging ocean waves and high winds. To achieve this, American engineers invented the very first dynamic positioning system, using heavy thrusters controlled by computers to keep the vessel stable within a few feet of its target coordinates. The trap was set, the money was spent, and the ultimate Cold War heist was about to begin. In the summer of 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer finally sailed out to the exact coordinates in the Pacific Ocean, and this is where the tension becomes absolutely unbearable. The massive ship dropped anchor directly above the sunken Soviet sub. But here's the kicker. The Soviet military started getting suspicious. They dispatched heavily armed spy ships to circle the American vessel, hovering just a few hundred yards away. Soviet sailors stood on their decks with binoculars staring directly at the Americans. Look at the ice-cold nerves of the American crew. They kept playing the role of civilian miners, waving back at the Soviets, while right beneath their feet, the heist of the century was actively taking place. Inside the hidden belly of the ship, the massive steel claw, codenamed Clementine, was slowly lowered into the pitch-black abyss. Pay close attention to this. It took days just to lower the giant mechanism through 3 miles of heavy ocean currents, and it gets even crazier. The pressure at that depth was over 8,000 pounds per square inch. One single mechanical failure, one snapped cable, and the entire multi-million-dollar project would disintegrate instantly. Flashing through the deep mud, the cameras on the claw finally captured the battered hull of the K-129. The massive steel fingers of Clementine wrapped around the submarine. Listen closely to this intense moment. The heavy winches on the ship began to turn, pulling thousands of tons of dead weight off the ocean floor. But then disaster struck. As the submarine was being hoisted halfway up the ocean column, the extreme structural stress caused a critical failure. A section of the mechanical claw suddenly snapped. Think about that for a second. 2/3 of the Soviet submarine broke away and plummeted back down into the dark abyss forever. But notice the absolute resilience of the American team. They didn't panic. They held their breath, kept the winches moving, and successfully pulled the remaining 1/3 of the nuclear submarine straight into the ship's secret belly. The doors of the hidden moon pool slammed shut. The Soviet spy ships outside had absolutely no idea that the Americans had just secured a massive piece of their premium military hardware right beneath them. And here is the ultimate proof of American supremacy. Inside that recovered section, the CIA secured highly classified Soviet documentation, top-secret equipment, and the bodies of fallen Soviet sailors, whom the American crew buried at sea with full military honors, conducted in traditional Russian language out of deep respect. When the secret eventually leaked to the American public years later, the entire world was left completely stunned. The Soviet Union was utterly humiliated. They realized that while they were busy building weapons of intimidation, America was busy engineering the impossible to dismantle them from the shadows. Mark this down. The Project Azorian proved that American ingenuity, backed by the sheer power of free enterprise, could literally reach into the darkest depths of the earth and rewrite history. And that is exactly how a fake American billionaire pulled off the greatest heist in Cold War history. To complete this massive operation, the crew worked in complete isolation for weeks, under the constant threat of Soviet intervention. The internal retrieval bay was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering, designed to completely drain millions of gallons of seawater before anyone could catch a glimpse of the wreckage. Experts from Langley immediately boarded the vessel to analyze the recovered hull, deciphering top-secret communication logs that would change Western understanding of Soviet naval tactics. Every piece of machinery, from the damaged torpedo tubes to the internal control systems, was carefully packed into unmarked crates to be studied in secret military laboratories across the United States. Even though 2/3 of the prize slipped away, the intelligence gathered from Project Azorian provided Washington with an unparalleled advantage for the remainder of the Cold War. It proved that no distance was too great and no ocean was too deep to stop American determination.